like we've got folks still joining us, but it is 10:15 according to the Microsoft clock. So I'm going to go ahead and kick things off here. My name's Ed Robertson. Welcome everybody to Business Technology Summit 2022, and more specifically to this hour's session, which is Azure Static Web Apps. I'm going to be a little bit of your guide for some of the housekeeping and a few other things that are going on, but very quickly I'm going to be turning it over to Rhett and to Fernando for the real meat of the process here. So a little bit of background on JourneyTEAM. So actually, there's one piece of this slide that I'm going to update, and it's a reflection on what's going on with JourneyTEAM. We are actually somewhere north of about 160 folks that make up JourneyTEAM. We actually been around as a company for about 29 years. We're headquartered in Draper, Utah, but we've got operations in Texas, Tennessee, California. We've got folks up on the East Coast that support projects literally all around the United States with a business that actually crosses the globe in its breadth. In the last 12 months, we brought on 350 plus active customers, 90% of which, and we're constantly trying to grow that number, are referenceable customers. So ideally, we run into you at the grocery store or at a public event, we don't want to have to wear a disguise or hide behind the canned corn because we're doing wrong by you. So we want to keep our customers happy and referenceable to the extent possible. In the last 5 years, we've completed over 1,300 projects across the range of what JourneyTEAM provides as a systems integrator. So next slide there, Rhett. A little bit of a tout here about who JourneyTEAM is as an organization. As I said, we thrive on the feedback. And so it's one thing when you've got a business development guy like me telling you how cool we are, but it's a completely different animal when we're getting that feedback from third parties. We are a 2-time Microsoft Partner of the Year. We are what's called, as far as partners go, part of the Microsoft Inner Circle, and that is basically the one within the top 1% of Microsoft partners in the world. And if you're familiar with Microsoft and their partner universe, there literally are tens of thousands of Microsoft partners worldwide. And so Microsoft seems to think that we're doing something right. Gold certification in those areas that we support, and do our best to continue to maintain that qualification. We pride ourselves on being kind of a cool place to work and hang around with some cool people. We've been recognized by the state of Utah as both the state of Utah and nationally as one of the best places to work. So we have a pretty good time doing what we do, and so that hopefully reflects in how we interact with our customers as well, and vice versa. So moving on. We call this our beehive slide because it's busy, but it helps to reflect what JourneyTEAM does and where we sort of play. JourneyTEAM is we use this term full stack, meaning a full service Microsoft systems integrator. So we cover pretty much the entire Microsoft enterprise solution universe. Our enterprise or ERP team, enterprise resource planning team, covers the Microsoft Dynamics enterprise resource planning world. That is Dynamics 365, both for Business Central, which is our mid-market to large market service, as well as finance and supply chain, which is the large scale enterprise resource planning platform. In addition to that, we also support the legacy on-premise versions of Microsoft Dynamics. So you'll hear about GP and NAV and SL. Those are the legacy on-premise versions of Microsoft's ERP suite. We cover that as well. Our CRM team covers the full range of the Dynamics 365 CRM tools. So that is sales, customer service, marketing, project service automation, field service, all of those areas that have to do with the life cycle of your customer relations. Our cloud team covers the Microsoft Modern Workplace space. That's your Office 365, Teams, your productivity suite, as well as the cybersecurity side of Microsoft. And so identity and access management, endpoint security, and those things like that. Collaboration and content is encompasses really kind of the SharePoint interface, but is much larger than that. It covers information architecture, knowledge management. This is Rhett's baby. He's going to dive into that in a little more detail. But these are the areas where your team thrives on: collaboration, information management, knowledge management, and how all of that works. Our data and BI practice covers basically the Microsoft Power Platform, and that's Power BI, Power Automate, Power Apps, Power Virtual Agent, all of those tools that have to do with data management, analysis, and business intelligence. And then one of the things that we realized over the years is that nobody buys technology for the sake of technology unless you're kind of a nerd, which some of us are. But at the end of the day, you're looking for solutions. And what we found is that the technology typically works as advertised. Where organizations run into challenges is in that area of user adoption and change management. Change is hard. And so we have a practice and an area that actually works at meeting your organization where you are, wherever you are, and helping with that people side of technology to make sure that we are taking you from where you are and helping you to get to where you want to go as an organization. So that's a very broad overview of who JourneyTEAM is and some of the solutions that we can bring to the table for organizations. So, Rhett.
All right, thanks, I appreciate that. I'm Rhett. I'm a developer at JourneyTEAM. I've been at JourneyTEAM for about 10 years, basically the same year we started BTS. I'm a developer at JourneyTEAM, and happy to be here. I'm going to turn it over to Lisa to give her a little introduction, and then I'll move on from there.
Great. And my name is Lisa Bowker, and I've been at JourneyTEAM here for about 2 years. And I am executive assistant to our CEO, and so Rhett's going to be talking to us all about Azure Static Web Apps, and I'm going to kind of demo some of the things that we've built within that space to kind of show you its capability there.
Thanks, Lisa. All right, so today we're going to talk about static web apps. And to understand static web apps, you need to understand the whole gambit of things a little bit. So what is the internet? Ladies and gentlemen, this is the internet. Just kidding, that's a joke from the IT crowd, so hopefully some of you get that. But really, like, what is a website? Like, what makes up a website? And websites are super complicated. They have operating systems. There's app servers. Some examples are IIS, Apache Node. You'll end up having to build it in some framework, maybe, or maybe not, but ASP.NET's a common, PHP, Perl, Python. Front-end frameworks, Angular, React, and Vue. There's hundreds of them, so I'm not like if I miss something, please don't feel like I'm just trying to hide it, but those are just very common ones. Data stores could be Cosmos DB, SQL, MySQL, Postgres. Could be, again, hundreds of data stores, and that could be even services like SharePoint or CRM could be counted as a data store. As well as, to set up a website, you have to have DNS, you have to manage SSL certs. If you want your data to be to get to your users fast, you might set up a CDN. So all of this is required to set up a website, and that's a lot of overhead. Well, Azure Static Web Apps is trying to simplify that. So at the end of the day, what is a website? Like, what's the whole purpose of it? It's really to serve content, in this case, in most cases, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, or media like videos, music, images, things like that. And then it's there to collect data, and that could be in the form of like people actually entering form data. It could be in the form of just people interacting with the website, and like YouTube collects data based on just people using it. So there's all kinds of things that can get collected, but this really is all websites boil down to is serving content and collecting data. So why should we use this Azure Static Web App? And I've got a bunch of little bullet points here, and we'll talk through each of these individual bullet points. But it's to help simplify that whole chart I just showed you a few minutes, or that whole page I showed you a minute ago. So we'll talk into each of these. So Azure Static Web Apps has a unified hosting and management in the cloud. So you just host static content, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, images, could be things like that within the static web app, and then you serve them through there. They offer free SSL certificates, which if you're familiar with the web, SSL is how we basically encrypt the data that we send to our clients or our users. And that data, that certificate can expire, and it's a renewal process and things like that. Well, Azure Static Web Apps takes that headache from us. They create the cert, they manage the cert. We don't have to ever renew the cert again. It's just in their hands at this point. And then they can integrate with authentication providers. And here's a few of them. There are actually some more, but they can integrate with Azure Active Directory, GitHub, and Twitter without the user or the developer really understanding how authentication works. They can do that. And then that simplifies it. So then you can have custom domains, right? You build a website, you want it to say your name, right? So you want it to be custom to you. Static websites web apps can actually use a custom domain that reflects your brand. Static websites are globally distributed, meaning they use what's called a CDN to deliver the content to a region closer to them. One of the biggest things to slow down your user's experience is how far they are from the actual server. Just geography is a huge part. So what static web apps do for us is they actually distribute that to a data center that's closer to the person making the request. So physically, the content has to go down a much shorter pipe to get to that person, and that ends up making their user experience faster, more seamless. You can have horizontally scaled APIs. So when we serve that content, we also may have users hitting servers and things like that, and accessing data. And when we do that, our APIs may have to scale up, may have to scale out, may have to be able to take more users without kind of seamlessly. And the idea is users don't, as a developer, I don't have to scale anything. I just build my service, and the static web app, or actually an Azure function, will scale that for us. And I'll talk into more depth on Azure functions in a minute, but that's kind of the gist of how that dynamic scale works. And then you can use what's called Azure Front Door, which is a service Microsoft offers, and it's a CDN as well that can distribute that content to the users. As developers, we always have our opinions on what framework to use. Azure Static Web Apps has a few. It's not every framework, but you can use it with most front-end frameworks, or a bunch of front-end frameworks. Here's just a small list, but there's in the slides I've included a link to more. When we distribute that out to you, you can go check those out. One I use a lot is React. I'm a huge React fan. I'm also an Angular fan. I really like Angular. So if I want to build a website in either of those frameworks, I get that ability. Vue is a very common one. I'm somewhat familiar with Vue, but it's not my top framework. There's Next and Blazor, which is Microsoft's new framework that is compiled. So it doesn't compile into JavaScript like a lot of frameworks may. It's actually compiled into and I can't think of the name, but into assembly, WebAssembly is what it's called. And then you can use TypeScript, which is just a superset of JavaScript. A lot of these languages actually, or these frameworks actually use JavaScript or TypeScript. So it's very cool like that. So one of the ways that I said that that data can get, or that one of the benefits is the seamless integration with Azure Functions. So Azure Functions are Microsoft's microservices, and I'll kind of pull up some pictures. But the microservices are essentially small APIs that can communicate with a backend, and that could be a database, that could be CRM, SharePoint, Dynamics 365, could be any backend service, but it's kind of that in between for a user who's using like a client and does not have access to the actual APIs to call them. So it's kind of a go-between, and that's a very secure way of handling data, as well as makes it seamless. So from the user's perspective, or from the website's perspective, it's the APIs are reverse proxied, which basically means when we call the web API from the website, we're just calling a path that's under the website. One of the biggest restrictions in calling APIs is what's called CORS. And if you're familiar with that, that can become kind of a headache for calling APIs. But these APIs end up becoming within the same domain as the web app, so you don't have CORS policies. You don't run into CORS issues. You can have, within a static web app, you have two options. You can have what's called a managed function, where all the code for your web app front end, as well as the code for your API, get all deployed in one deployment, and it's all managed there. It is somewhat limited. You can only run with these three runtimes: C#, JavaScript, and Python. You can only build HTTP triggers into that function. You can only have the consumption plan. You can't leverage the premium plans. And then there's no durable functions, managed identities, and app service authentication. So they're a little more limited, but if your code just needs to maybe process stuff or call a backend service, these are a good way to go. But if it needs to do something more complicated than that, then you might want to do what's called bring your own function. And essentially is you build a function app and you deploy it, and then you link up your static web app with that function. It's as seamless as a managed function, but it's a little more complicated in the setup. See, and then you can use what's called Azure API management, which is basically a front end to one or more APIs, and you can set up throttling, you can set up authentication, things like that, so that you can simplify how you manage those APIs. And then another benefit of static web apps is they have a seamless integration with Azure DevOps and GitHub. So essentially, when I do a deployment, I don't actually publish anything. I don't go to Visual Studio and hit the publish button, or I don't have to do anything like that. I check in my code, I put it on a specific branch, and when it's checked into that branch, then there is a CI/CD process, or a pipeline that kicks off, and it will do that deployment. It can compile the code, it can check for errors, it may check for, you can set it up if you want to do some front-end testing. You have kind of all kinds of options within those pipelines, but essentially it will deploy that code for us without me ever having to deploy it. And hopefully all of your production code will be in line with a branch in your repo. You can also set up staging environments with those branches. So if you have a prod environment, you may link it up to the main branch. If you have like a dev environment, you may link it up to a dev branch and have that so that like before you want to go to prod, you can deploy to another app that people can access and test and make sure it's ready. And then when you're finally ready, you can do a pull request right on your main branch, and then it will check into it'll check in the code, and then it'll compile and deploy it to your production site. So simplifies that, makes it more secure in the deployment. You're not having everybody deploying or overwriting each other's deployments because your central repository is what's handling that deployment. So going back to that original slide we looked at, we basically cut out a lot of the things that we were originally dependent on. We no longer have to worry about an operating system. In the end, these are all deployed to Microsoft servers, and they're managing those operating systems. So you don't have to worry about checking for updates. Maybe there's some bug in a patch. Microsoft will patch that. So that's on them at that point. You don't have to worry about spinning up an application server. The service itself is that, and they handle all of that delivery. They handle any load balancing, things like that. That's just out of your purview, and you don't necessarily have to manage any of that. Backend frameworks, we kind of lost a lot of those backend frameworks in favor of Azure Functions. So the Azure Functions become that backend framework, and that like I say, they're very powerful. So the loss of maybe ASP.NET or PHP probably isn't a huge loss if your website's built well. And then finally, you still have those front end frameworks. If you like React, if you like Angular, you like Vue, you can still use that. You still have that ability. Your data stores don't go away because in the end, Azure Functions can communicate with those data stores. And finally, you don't have to manage SSL certs and CDNs. All of that is not out of your control, but out of your you don't have to worry about it. Microsoft will handle that at that point. And then finally, DNS, and you'll see I put a little asterisk on it, but DNS is essentially can be managed at the Microsoft level. You don't have to manage it, although you can. If you've got GoDaddy and that's your DNS provider, you can still use them. But if you want Microsoft to handle that DNS, they can handle it as well. All right, and now I'm going to hand it over to Lisa to demo a tool we've built. She'll talk about it.
Yeah, thanks, Rhett. So when we started working together on this tool, I gave Rhett a huge list of asks that I needed to meet my requirements. So if you want to flip to the next slide, Rhett, we'll kind of talk first about what an RPM is. So as we go into this tool, you have some understanding of what we're talking about. So an RPM for us means rapid performance measurements. And ultimately what I needed and what an RPM is it's a way to track individual employee performance metrics. So what I needed is a way to track that and meet each of those different items for each individual employee that we have here at JourneyTEAM. So I needed those to be our bars, which are behavior, actions, and results. So the key performance indicators on which every person's performance is based. I also needed him a way to add enhancers for us to add points for things that people might be doing that are valuable, but maybe not necessarily required items within the KPI space, and qualifiers, which are points that can be removed from the RPM score for something not happening that was supposed to happen. So I needed all of this to be in one app, easy to use, and something that we could deploy quite easily to have adoption here at the company. So I'm going to kind of take us through what Rhett ended up building and what we have here, which is a pretty cool tool. So I'm going to steal screen share from you here, Rhett, if that's okay. Awesome. So this is the tool that we ended up building and that Rhett really put together in a great way. So when our people come into their RPM, they just see this page. This is a homepage that every employee has, and it allows you to see what your RPM score was for every month that we've submitted it. So in October, I just gave myself a mock score. So I gave myself 100 for October for now. So when employees come in, they can see the month and what their RPM score with a little color coordinated dot as well. So we could quite easily see what range people were in for RPM. And then when employees come in, they can just view their RPM. So I just put in some fake numbers here for this, right? So for me, this RPM is applicable only to me. It is one that feeds back to my position and my department. And I can put in on the back end, right? We can put in for each person what each of their items were. So these are the bars, right? We're going to need to capitalize this. So bars should be capitalized, right? So I don't know if we can put that on our list, Rhett.
Let me fix that right now.
Awesome, thank you.
Go ahead and present. I'll make the update.
Perfect. So you can see here are what my KPIs are and what's important. We put a weight on them. So how important is it? And we wanted all the weights to add up to 20. So that we could get a score out of 100, right? So Rhett needed to put on a weight where we had to have it not go above 20, and then we could put in all the numbers that they could be, and then the actual of what they got, which corresponds to the RPM score. So which is the weight times whatever number category it falls in, and that's how we get a score out of 100. So this is what all employees can see for every month that they've been submitted. So this is the employee side, which is cool, easy to use, very user-friendly. Now, when we go, we know that managers obviously need to submit their RPM scores for their employee. So we also have the manager portal for anyone that has direct reports. So when people who have direct reports come, they can see their team and then their RPM total, if they have an RPM, and the status. So I'm going to switch to the My Department tab. And the difference between these tabs is my team is the people who directly report to you, and the department is everyone within your team. And because I don't have direct reports, no one pulls up for me here, so we're going to use the My Department tab, which looks the exact same. So for this, I can see, okay, here's my team. Here is their name, right, title, all of those pieces. The RPM score, if they have an RPM, and if it's published or in draft form. So if I go back to September here, I can see, great, we have one published for Brian, Eric, myself, but we have not published one for Milo yet. It looks like his is still in draft form. So I know that we haven't done that yet. So I can very easily go into Milo's and I can say, okay, great. Yes, Milo actually got a 75 here, and I can move this in sprint commitment. He got a 93, and I can add any notes I want. I can tell Milo, hey, great month. You know, you did four hours of training. Which is great. I can add any of those enhancers that I talked about of, great, Milo did a marketing blog where he got a certification. So I'm going to give him points for that, which you can see increases his total up here, which is really great. But I can say, hey, you know, timeliness, which is a qualifier for us. You were late a couple times in terms of getting time in. So now we're going to go -5. So I can say, great, this all looks correct. And I can publish it. And now when I come back here, I can see, okay, my whole team has been published, which is awesome. So that is a cool thing on the manager side, that they can edit or they can just view, and they can see exactly what the employee will see as well. So you can see, great, this is what Lisa is seeing. And then if I look and I'm like, oh, this is not correct, I can just recall my RPM and it goes right back into draft state, so I can edit anything that I need to and say, okay, that's actually correct, and now republish it. And then I can see that change directly reflected. So it went down from 100 to 88. And when I go back home, I can automatically see that reflected on my side as the employee. So that's kind of the two main ones. But the coolest tab that we have is the admin portal, which is where all of this feeds into. So Rhett did a really great job on this side of building out everything I asked for in a really easy to use way. So the admin portal is really quite locked down because it impacts everyone's templates and RPM. So I can see a list of all of our employees. So I can see, great, and these are all draft ones, so I just put in some fake data here for people. So I can see all of the employees, and I can see if I want to make them a manager. If I say, oh, Alan has direct reports, great. Now by clicking this, Alan now has access to his manager portal as well, which is pretty cool. Or if I need to say, all right, I just need to check how Lisa is doing, I can go in and I can just see my exact person I'm looking for through the search feature, which is great. The other thing, if you have, if you're like, oh, we don't want to use green through red colors, you can edit the colors to be whatever you would like. So that is what pulls up in the 1 through 5 scale as well. So you can change any of those colors to meet whatever you need. You can see any role. So here are all the roles that we have at JourneyTEAM. And the cool thing is I can go in and I can see, okay, awesome. I need to see that, okay, Shane is in here, and it takes me right back to that employee tab. So this is just helpful so you know what the roles are and who is in those roles. And I can make any edits to that I need. And same with departments. I can see all the departments we have, and I can see, great, here's our CRM team. So I can see all of just the CRM team if I want to edit down that way as well, which is cool. Now the templates, and this is the part that we can do a variety of ways. I had Rhett just set a default template that automatically goes to every employee at JourneyTEAM until we change it specifically for them. So the way that we did it to allow if RPMs can change, we have a template for every role and department. So if we have a developer that is in our, collaboration content management team, and we have a developer that is in our CRM team, and they might have the same title, but they might be different departments, might have different requirements. Each of them can have a different RPM based on where they sit on the team and their role, which is a pretty cool thing. And then I can say, okay, for our principal software developer, collaboration content management, I need to make an edit to this template, and I can go and I can see all of those different pieces and make any changes that I need. The other cool thing, if I wanted to change, and we'll just go to mine because I don't want to mess with any of the ones that we have here. So if we go to my template, or if we just create a template here, actually, I can create the name of what this is, and I can say, all right, this is going to be Lisa's, and I can put the role, and I can just start to type in, and it'll pull up. Now, I can add any of the bars in. I can add the weight, but as I said, the weight has to equal 20. So Rhett put in some standards that if I try and do 21 and save it, it won't let me because 1, the template already exists, and 2, the weight must equal 20. So it'll not let you do anything that's outside of the realm of RPMs, and so you can set those standards of what you want that to look like, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to cancel this, and you can see all of those. And then I can also add any enhancers and any qualifiers that I want that will then automatically pull up on the template side. So it is pretty cool that all of that exists and meets those RPM requirements. And now we have a system and a tracking system where we can track each individually employee performance and connect that back to whatever we need, whether it's just performance or bonuses, or if we're looking to promote or whatever. It looks like we have that all in one place, which is a really awesome tool for us. So we'll just refresh. Do we think
Yep, I think it's ready.
All right, so if we refresh this and look,
You might have to hit Control.
so you can see now the bars is capitalized. So Rhett just did that really quick for me as he was sitting here, which kind of really adds to the ease of the tool as well, and ease of the Azure Static Web Apps. So this is a pretty cool tool that we offer to help track employee performance that we're really proud of what we've been able to come up with. So that is our RPM tool that we've been doing.
Cool. Thank you, Lisa. I will actually dig a little bit into the code. We'll talk about what that looks like from an Azure Static Web App perspective. Give me a second and I'll pull my slides up again. A user comes in, they'll hit they are the client, if you will. They'll hit our web app. Our web app will then redirect them to Active Directory to make sure they're logged in and our website's secured. Once they're logged in, it'll redirect them back with access tokens and things like that. Then our web app will use that access token to call our API. Our API is secure, so if someone who's malicious tried to come along and access it, they can't because they don't have access tokens that were issued by our trusted authority, which is Active Directory in this case. And then our function app, which is that lightning bolt, will call a backend data source. In our case, we just use Cosmos. It's our data store. But if we wanted to, we could use an external, another system. But in this case, we're just using Cosmos. This is the code, right? I've basically got 2 folders. I've got my API folder, which hosts all the code for the Azure Web App or Azure Function. And then I've got my RPM tool app code. In this case, like I said, I like React. So I ended up building this solution in React and TypeScript. all in a source code folder. I can build and test all this locally, and then when I'm ready to deploy it, it ends up pushing it to Azure. Some of the meat to all of this is actually this static web app config. So I've got this, and mine's actually super simple, but it basically looks at any navigation and says, oh, we're hitting, just automatically redirect anything to index.html, except for, and it excludes static files. So if for some reason we deploy, or well, if we deploy photos, CSS files, JPEGs, anything like that into the static folder, it'll automatically prevent the server from redirecting to those, or with those, it'll just grab the actual file. The other piece that they provide when you scaffold static web app is this CI/CD pipeline. So basically, it's just a task that you can set up with your within Azure or Git. There's actually one for each, but it gets an access token that gets securely stored in the repo. It then deploys it. In my case, I used I didn't do a bring your own, or I did a bring your own function. So because I'm bringing my own function, I actually don't provide that. I actually have to build a separate part of the pipeline. I didn't do it as part of this demo, but to deploy the API. But if you wanted to bring your own function, you can just point to the URL or the path of the API, and it'll build and deploy it as it deploys. So it's pretty slick. I think so. A lot of this is, like I say, it's just React at this point. So I've used React routing, and if you noticed, Lisa was browsing through the website and the URL changed. It's all a single page app, but it looks like it's not. It's all routed, so everything looks like it's pathed historically. People can browse backwards, or you can give someone a link to a page and it'll load that for them. And kind of that's the meat of it. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we will actually cover that, or we can talk through them right now. Thanks for coming, everyone.
All righty. Well, hey, thanks, Rhett, and thanks, Lisa, for sharing that information with us. And obviously, a lot of times the big information comes after this. So we'll be looking forward to fielding any questions. We've got time here.
Also, just as an added plug to Lisa's demo, our RPM tool, we're building it for us internally, but it's also something we're looking for beta testers within clients. So if you're interested in it, please reach out to Ed or someone on our sales team, and we can set up a demo for it and help answer more questions if you have any. So Matt Larson just dropped in the chat, could we compare using a static web app from a storage account versus a static web app? You can set up what's called it's not exactly a static web app. It's just a web server for the storage account. A lot of the capability is similar across them, Matt. So you have the ability to use a CDN with a storage account, things like that. You don't get the ability to do the bring your own function and Azure Functions as a backend for proxy functions. Microsoft generally recommends using static web apps if you need to host a custom domain. The domain piece is a little harder with the storage account web app, whereas the static web app, it's a lot simpler to set up domains and handle that SSL stuff. And so generally the recommendation from Microsoft is if it needs to do something more or you want it to use a custom domain with SSL, go that route. Is there a use case for embedding static web apps inside of CRM to get more control over UI and pull data from additional sources? There could be a use case for that. I haven't really done it. That'd be like basically iframing your static web app into CRM. Generally, if you want to extend CRM, you actually can leverage PCF components, which are basically coded components, and that'd be the route I would generally take if I need to extend it. Then you could set up like, say, an Azure function. If you needed to call an external system or something, you can actually set up plugins and things within CRM to call external systems. So there may be actually a more native route to do it within CRM. But if you're unfamiliar with CRM technology and you want to go something fast and quick, there might be some benefit in just doing a static web app. If you want to also maybe build it in one place and not have to manage two code bases, that might also be a good use case. But like I said, I think my generally when I want to extend CRM, I leverage PCF components.